Today I want to show you guys two videos on bureaucracy that can help you understand it better. The links to the videos are under the content folder in Blackboard if you want to go review them again. And so I'm gonna show you guys the videos first, and then we're gonna go on to the definitions and explaining those. And then once we're done with those, we'll go to talking about the readings in canon, the enduring state. And also kind of just give me a little leniency today because I've been sick since like Wednesday. So yeah, I'm a little delirious. But okay, so let me share the screen, share computer sound. Okay, so here is Bureaucracy Basics.
Hi, I'm Craig, and this is Crash Course Government and Politics, and today we're going to talk about bureaucracies just as soon as I finish filling out these forms. Do I really have to initial here, here, and here on all three copies, Stan? Regulations say so? All right. I'm just kidding. I don't really have to fill out forms in triplicate in order to make an episode of Crash Course. But this kind of stuff is one of the main reasons that people don't like bureaucracies. Americans associate them with incomprehensible rules and time-wasting procedures. And probably most annoying, actual bureaucrats. But bureaucracies are a lot like our extended families in that we largely don't understand, or at least don't appreciate, the important role that bureaucracies play in our lives, mainly because of all the forms, and because my cousin who always ate all the cookies from the jar at Grandma's house. So what exactly is a bureaucracy? I don't like to do this because I'm arrogant and lazy, but sometimes it's helpful to go to a dictionary when you need to find out what a word means. So here's a serviceable political sciencey definition. A bureaucracy is a complex structure of offices, tasks, rules, and principles of organization that are employed by all large-scale institutions to coordinate the work of their personnel. 2 points to emphasize here. First, bureaucracies are made up of experts who usually know more about the topic at hand than you do, and who are able to divide up complex tasks so that they can get done. Second, all large-scale institutions use bureaucracies, so the distinction between big business and big government is, in at least this respect, bogus, or what I like to call a false dichotomy. Is that too pretentious to say false dichotomy, Stan? I don't care. I'm saying it. False dichotomy. So if people hate bureaucracies so much and compare them unfavorably with Google and Amazon, why do we have them? Well, the main reason is that bureaucracies are efficient. They make it easier for government to accomplish tasks quickly and to basically operate at all. In the U.S., federal bureaucrats fulfill a number of specific important functions. One, bureaucrats implement the laws that Congress writes. Have you ever read a law? They're pretty complicated. It's a good idea to have experts who can interpret them and put them into action. Two, bureaucrats also make and enforce their own rules. But this isn't as action hero-ish as it sounds. And three, they settle disputes through a process called administrative adjudication, which makes them kind of like courts. Now, since I know that all of you have been paying extremely close attention to these episodes, you know that at least two of those functions are problematic in ways that go beyond making rules that seem Byzantine or stupid, or both. Byzantupid. The big concern here is the separation of powers, which you remember is the idea that power is divided between three branches of government. Technically, the federal bureaucracy is part of the executive branch, but it's so big that it dwarfs the other two branches and can easily overpower them. Much like I overpower this eagle. That's right, eagle. I make my own rules. Like a bureaucracy. But an even more troubling, to some people, aspect of bureaucracies is what they actually do. So let's go to the thought bubble. Bureaucracies don't just enforce the rules, they make new ones, called regulations. In doing this, they're acting like a legislature, especially since the rules have the force of law and people can be punished for breaking them. For example, if you say sticks on TV, the FCC can fine you, just like the local law enforcement would if you broke a state law against speeding. And don't say sticks to the cop. But according to the Constitution, Congress is supposed to make the laws. So if you're a constitutional formalist, this is going to give you fits. On the other hand, the rulemaking process allows for a degree of popular participation that goes way beyond what happens in Congress. In 2014, Congress called for the mandatory notice and comment period on new FCC rules on the issue of net neutrality. Any person can read the proposed rules, which are not easy to understand, and offer a public comment, including suggestions for new rules using the internet. The bureaucracy is required to read the comments, and they can be incorporated into the final rules that are published in the Federal Register. So in a way, federal rulemaking is more democratic than congressional lawmaking, but it's still not in the Constitution. Administrative adjudication raises similar separation of powers issues, but they're less problematic because the Constitution gives Congress the right to establish courts other than the Supreme Court, And it doesn't say that these can't be administrative tribunals that are part of bureaucratic agencies. Many low-level bureaucratic positions are filled through competitive exam-based civil service procedures, which are supposed to ensure a level of expertise and take politics out of the staffing process. But many upper-level bureaucratic leaders, especially cabinet secretaries and also ambassadors, are very political. For one thing, they're appointed by politicians who may be repaying favors or trying to pack the agencies with like-minded favorites. For another, bureaucrats engage in bargaining and protect their own interests, the very thing that politicians do all the time. Thanks, Thought Bubble. So, the first reason we keep bureaucracies is because bureaucracies are useful. They do get things done, even though it might not be as quickly as we'd like. And some of these things are things we want done, like inspecting our meat so we don't get E. coli or salmonella or mad cow disease. One response to this that we'll talk about later is to get rid of public bureaucracies and contract their tasks out to private companies. There's something to be said for this. After all, in a lot of ways, UPS does a better job of getting packages to us than the Postal Service does. And I also have a lot more fun at the private bowling alley than the public one. There's no such thing as a public bowling alley. If there is, I'm going. Might be free. But the main argument for privatization seems to be cost, and that one might not always be true. It seems unlikely that a private corporation would spring up to inspect meat, and although we could rely on pricing to signal that our chicken wings are salmonella-free, I don't think it's a good idea. So in addition to being useful in filling roles that the private sector might not fill, one of the reasons we have so many bureaucracies is because Congress keeps making them and delegating power to them. If we didn't have bureaucracy, congressmen and their staff would be taking on all the oversight and enforcement of their own laws. In addition to creating its own separation of powers problem, this might be kind of chaotic considering that potentially the entire House of Representatives could be replaced every 2 years. One advantage of bureaucracies is a certain amount of stability and the built-up expertise that comes with it. Probably the main reason why we don't change bureaucracies, though, is that doing so is really difficult. Once Congress makes a bureaucracy, it's usually permanent for a number of practical and political reasons. We'll get into those reasons next time. So I'm going to wrap this up with a little bit of a reminder about federalism, based on a largely unwarranted assertion. I bet that if you ask most Americans to give an example of a bureaucracy, they will say the DMV. Most people will tell you a DMV horror story of the time they had to wait in line for 4 hours just to renew their license, and when they got to the counter, a clerk told them that they didn't have the right forms and they needed to post a money order and not a credit card or a check or even cash, and that anyway they had to go on break and I had to come back in 15 minutes and all I wanted was my license. The DMV! And I sympathize with this predicament, but I feel the need to remind anyone who has had this experience at the DMV that it's a state bureaucracy, not the federal bureaucracy. Most of the bureaucrats you meet in your daily life, teachers, policemen, tax assessors, are officials of your state government, not the federal government like bureaucrat Jimmy, which is pretty much what the framers intended. So it's a good idea to be thoughtful about which government we're going to transfer our anger towards and to rage against the correct machine. That's what federalism's all about. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week. Crash Course Government and Politics is produced in association with PBS Digital Studios. Support for Crash.
Okay, so that was just the little basics of bureaucracy. Do you guys have any questions before we go to the types of bureaucracy video?
So are bureaucrats government workers?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If you're paid by either the federal government or the state government, you're a bureaucrat.
Okay.
Technically, because I'm paid by the state, I am a bureaucrat.
Can I find this on Sexy T?
Yep. Yeah, under the content folders, under bureaucracy.
Okay, because I came in a little bit late.
Yeah, definitely, and I highly encourage you guys rewatching these.
Okay.
Okay, ready to go to the next one? All right. This one's going to be a little bit short.
Hi, I'm Craig, and this is Crash Course Government and Politics, and today we're going to do something we try to do a lot at Crash Course, punch eagles. Also, help you understand the news better. Now, we're not going to explain it like Ezra Klein, well, we sort of will, or break it down into graphs and charts like Nate Silver, or slow jam it like Jimmy Fallon. We're not going to slow jam it, Stan. Instead, bureaucrat Jimmy and I are going to give you some tools you need to better understand news stories and opinions about government and politics by describing the various types of bureaucracies that affect our lives. Ain't that right, BJ? Yeah. There are a number of ways we can try to make sense of the vast federal bureaucracy, and one of the most straightforward is to categorize the different agencies by type. Now, labeling them this way doesn't actually tell us what they do, but you'll see them labeled this way in books and articles, so you should be familiar with the terms that political writers use. The first type of bureaucracy is the cabinet-level agency, also called the executive department. Each of the 15 departments is usually headed by a secretary, except the Justice Department, which is run by the Attorney General. You can find a list of the executive departments in any good textbook, and I bet there might be a list on the internet somewhere too. Maybe. But the ones you hear the most about are the State Department, the Department of Defense, and the Treasury Department. Others, like the Department of the Interior or Housing and Urban Development, you usually only hear about when there's a new secretary or a scandal. Executive departments mostly provide services through sub-agencies. For example, the FBI is technically part of the Department of Justice, and the FDA is part of the Department of Health and Human Services. There are also independent agencies that are very similar to executive departments because their heads require Senate confirmation. Well, their whole body requires. I'm talking about the head, like they're the boss, the head of the agency. The best example here is the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, but NASA is another independent agency. Next, we have the independent regulatory commissions, which are supposed to be further removed from presidential oversight, which makes them independent. You can recognize them because they're usually called commissions, like the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Securities and Exchange Commission. They all have rule-making authority and the power to punish violations of the rules, often through fines. If you pay attention to stories about banking, especially banking malfeasance, you'll find plenty of stories about SEC fines. Last, and pretty much least, frankly, are the government corporations that are supposed to make profits, but in fact tend to rely on government subsidies to stay afloat. The U.S. Postal Service and Amtrak are the best known, and for most Americans, these are the agencies with which we have the most contact, especially the post office. A more useful way to think about bureaucracies is in terms of what they actually do, their functions, although the problem here is that many bureaucracies have more than one function. Maybe the thought bubble can help us out. Thought bubble! Let's do this! Some bureaucracies primarily serve clients. Many of the sub-agencies of the cabinet departments fit this bill, with the most obvious being the Food and Drug Administration, which serves the public by testing and approving new drugs, the Centers for Disease Control, which tries to do exactly what the name suggests, and the National Institutes of Health, which, among other things, sponsors research that improves citizens' health. All of these agencies are under the auspices of the Department of Health and Human Services. Another good example of a client-serving agency is the Department of Agriculture, which, in addition to rating meat, administers the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which is the snappy new name for food stamps. A second function that many agencies perform is to maintain the union. One way agencies maintain the union is by collecting revenue, because without money, the country doesn't function. The main agency in charge of collecting revenue is the IRS. A second form of maintaining the union is providing security for its citizens. The Department of Justice, which prosecutes federal crimes and protects civil rights, and the Department of Homeland Security, which among other things is in charge of airport security, are the main agencies that ensure internal security. Bureaucracies also keep Americans safe from external threats. This is the job of various intelligence services like the CIA and NSA, and especially the Department of Defense. A third function of bureaucracies is to regulate economic activity, primarily by creating and enforcing rules and regulations. Some of the agencies primarily charged with enforcing regulations are housed within executive departments, like OSHA within the Department of Labor. Others, like the FCC and SEC, are independent. The fourth major function of bureaucracies is closely related to regulating economic activity. Some bureaucracies have the primary function of redistributing economic resources. Agencies concerned with fiscal and monetary policy handle the inflow and outflow of money in the economy through taxes, spending, and interest rates. Providing direct aid to the poor or welfare is another function of bureaucracies that is even more complex and controversial. Most of these agencies, like the Social Security Administration, provide direct services, so we can see the overlap between the function of agencies. Thanks, Thought Bubble. I've been suggesting that even though they aren't mentioned in the Constitution, bureaucracies are pretty powerful, so I should probably explain where that power comes from. Basically, Thor's hammer. Actually, no, it doesn't come from that at all. It comes from Congress, which, as we've seen, delegates power to executive agencies in varying degrees. But once the agencies exist, they create power for themselves by maximizing their budgets. Bureaucracies lobby for their own interests, and the bigger and more important they are, the more money they get from Congress. We tend to think that the national defense is important, so the Department of Defense is able to convince Congress to give it lots of money. Although more money can lead to more problems, as Biggie helpfully reminded us. Money is also probably the most important lever of power in the U.S. In addition to getting money for themselves, another source of bureaucratic power is the expertise of bureaucrats themselves. The president, and especially Congress, will often rely on bureaucratic experts to tell them how a policy will be implemented. The source of their power is the expert's command of useful information. You shouldn't underestimate this, as any number of technology companies will tell you. So those are two ways of thinking about bureaucracies. I hope that they're helpful, and at least when you hear about the FCC issuing a fine for Janet Jackson's wardrobe malfunction or something, you'll understand who's doing the punishing. And when you read about Congress cutting SNAP funding, you'll be like, oh, SNAP, that's tied up with a farm bill. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next episode. Crash Course Government and Politics is produced.
Okay, so do you guys have any initial questions after that, or do you want to move on to the definitions? You're muted, Betty.
I intended to send you this as my question,
Uh-huh.
but I forgot. So are bureaucracies basically agencies?
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the agencies that basically get our laws implemented and everything, and the people that make up those agencies. Are you saying something, trainer? Because I think you're mute. I can't hear you. Um, so I can't, if you're saying anything, I can't quite hear you, unfortunately. So let's move on to the definitions, and hopefully we can clear things up. Sound good? All right. So now that like we went over bureaucracy and everything, do you feel confident with that definition, or do you want to go over it again?
No, I think it makes, especially the one after my question. It makes
Okay.
way more sense.
Okay, cool. And then you can always go back to the basics of bureaucracy video where he gives a good definition in the beginning.
Okay.
And so, what are independent agencies?
It's an agency that's not a part of the cabinet department.
Yeah, and so, what would an example of that be?
Like Department of like Agriculture or something.
Actually,
No.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I got that backwards. Okay, I don't know what I'm talking about.
It's okay. Good, you tried. That's important. So, I'm gonna go over to Wikipedia here because it gives a nice big old list as far as examples of agencies. So, independent agencies are essentially I'm trying to organize my thoughts. So agencies are basically, well, independent agencies are organizations where there needs to be a separation between the influence of the executive branch from these agencies. Because as you saw with the first type of bureaucracy, all of those cabinet positions and everything, those are appointed, by the president. And so those agencies aren't really independent from executive kind of influence. So basically, those cabinet heads are going to be more influenced by wanting to keep the president happy so they can keep their job. Now, with these independent agencies, they are they've been designated too important to be able to have that influence on them, such as the Central Intelligence Agency. You can't have, it'd be really bad if the president could influence the head of the CIA rather than, the CIA head being able to work on his own. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I got confused because, well, more so the definitions, because so the independent agencies, you're talking about that separation between the influence of the executive branch, so the president,
Mm-hmm.
government. So what I'm understanding is since they have this power, and you talked about something about appointment,
Yeah.
bureaucracy is not. So does that mean independent agencies aren't like in the term of bureaucracy because bureaucracy are non-elected officials, but yet the laws are implemented to them. Like the law, like implement is the only thing that kind of is the same thing as an independent agency, but yet it's kind of draws away from it at the same time because they're kind of separated.
So they're actually being appointed rather than elected. The people aren't being the ones who are electing these people into the cabinet positions. The presidential appointment is kind of what changes that, and one thing that makes these independent agencies even more independent is that their head must be approved by the Senate or Congress. Sorry, my bad. Congress needs to approve the head of these organizations, these agencies.
Of the independent agency.
That way, they don't have the possible influence of, oh, I'm the president, I appointed you to this position, scratch my back because I scratched yours.
So in bureaucracy, you said they get appointed, not elected. So that's what they mean about not being elected. They get appointed. Am I correct?
Yep.
And so the independent agencies as well, but they get appointed by, well, approved by the Congress. Okay.
And then, as it was said in, I think the bureaucracy basics video, the way that all of the other jobs are appointed are through merit-based tests and everything. So they take politics out of the equation.
So what would be examples? Sorry, before I interrupted my question, but we were in the examples of the independent agencies.
And so all of these right here that I have shared on the screen are examples of independent agencies, like the
Nuclear Regulatory Commission.
yeah,
Retirement. What was that one? Federal Retirement
Thrift Investment
Board. Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board.
A lot of these, and a lot of them are fairly small, but we have big ones like NASA and the Federal Trade Commission and everything.
NASA's its own agency?
Yep.
I did not know that. I would have thought that would be part of, but they wouldn't be an independent.
It's right here. It says NASA is a U.S. government space agency that is responsible for the civilian space program.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, do independent agencies receive money from the government?
That's how they're funded.
Okay.
That's why I was surprised that it was its own independent agency because I was like, wait, they're funded.
Yeah.
And the bureaucrats lobby the politicians to get a bigger budget for their agency because more money, more stuff to do. And so the difference, I want to move into regulatory agencies because they're a part of independent agencies, but it's a subcategory. And so these are distinct in the fact that the heads of the independent regulatory agencies can only be removed for cause, whereas independent agencies such as the Environmental Protection Agency and the cabinet department heads serve at the pleasure of the president. So basically, the heads of independent regulatory agencies can only be removed from office, from their job, if they really screwed up, not because the president doesn't like them anymore.
So you're saying in the regulatory agencies, their heads can be taken off, basically. Their heads. The heads can be replaced if they mess up. So it's not necessarily like the president doesn't want them anymore. But in the independent agencies, the president can unappoint them, basically.
No. So, well, actually, no, you're right. So, the independent regulatory agencies can't be removed by the president. But plain independent agencies have the possibility. But like it said, it's for more so things as like the Environmental Protection Agency, not the Food and Drug Administration. Because we don't want politics in our testing of food and everything, because that's a fairly objective thing that should just be independent. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So, all right, we did independent agency and regulatory agency. Now, let's go to government corporations. Now, they mentioned two examples of government corporations in the video. Do you guys remember?
Yeah, it was the one where it was like it showed that little diagram, and it was like the claw thing moving money around.
Actually, that's a different type of agency. Just one that's an economic agency. What they meant, good try. I thank you for offering something. So an example of a government-owned corporation would be Amtrak or the Postal Service. Do any of you guys use Amtrak? I do. I use it all the time to get home because I live 4 hours south of here, so at least that's where my parents are from. So
it was the example of how it's faster to get stuff through FedEx rather than Postal Service.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not that cool.
And so, just in the U.S., these are the government-owned corporations. And as you can see, there's Amtrak, Conrail, and yeah, so quite there's actually more than I expected, to be honest. But that's federal bureaucracy. So let us go on to okay, so you guys feel comfortable with regulatory agency? And those are basically those commissions that he was talking about. Oh, sorry.
Wait, what?
I missed what you said, Betty.
I thought we were just talking about government corporation.
Oh, yeah, no, I was moving on to the next definition. Sorry.
Wait, so what we just talked about, was that government corporation or regulatory agency?
That was government corporation.
Okay, and so the regulatory was a whole head of independent regulatory cannot rule by president.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, because when you think of independent agencies, think of those first, and then think of like a subheading of independent regulatory agencies. Because they kind of go hand in hand. And then do you guys feel confident about government corporations?
God damn it. Let's hope this works.
you have any questions about them?
Does everything work now?
Yeah,
Everything
we can
working?
hear you now.
Okay, yeah, no, because I was trying to make the phone work and it kept disconnecting. I think it was just the connection's bad on the phone. Also, it's good that you guys didn't hear my dad's rambling. He kept talking for some reason. It's like, goddamn shit. Oh yeah, so oh yeah, thanks for the showing the video. I guess that video did clear up the question I asked earlier. So
Good.
that's good. Yeah, because also I maybe I missed this, but I was gonna give an example about how like you could think of the heads of the bureaucracies kind of like an executive order. Like they can, it's kind of balanced out by like the next president can switch it out. So that kind of like it's not just stationary as much as they're not there forever. So yeah, as an example, I know it's kind of like late on that, but mic's broken.
It's okay. Anything helps.
Yeah.
All right. So are you guys comfortable with government corporations, or do you want to move on?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so a government corporation is owned by the government,
Mm-hmm.
and then an independent agency, who owns them?
Technically,
So,
still the government.
It's still the government.
It's
The
just
difference between like the independent agency and the government corporation is that the government corporation is for profit. It's like for profit, but also for service at the same time,
Okay.
if that makes sense, because it's like, okay, here we're offering the service at a lower rate than what a private company might offer it.
Okay.
Oh,
So is it that that's why they did the definition of FedEx and Postal Service?
Mm-hmm.
That it's more expensive through FedEx, but yeah, it's more efficient?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where, and then we'll come to this kind of argument in a little bit of privatization versus public agency and stuff like that.
Yep.
There's it's one of kind of the bigger political divides in the parties and stuff like that. So, can somebody tell me what the Federal Reserve is?
Oh crap! When was the Federal Reserve founded? I forgot. It's different from the First National Bank. Crap.
So I just searched it up on Google. Anybody want to go? Because I'm doing a lot of talking. I don't want to bore anybody.
I'm sorry. What you kind of?
But if you don't want to go, is the Federal Banking Authority. But can you hear me?
I didn't get any of that. I think your internet connection is cutting out.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Now?
You can hear you now, but it'll kind of like cut out for some reason.
Okay. So I'm just saying, if anybody else wants to go, I'll give you guys a chance since, I'm doing a lot of the talking. Otherwise, I'll go if it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I basically just Googled it and I can't find it. So I said the Federal Banking Authority in the U.S. that performs the functions of a central bank and is used to implement the country's monetary policy, providing a national system of reserve cash available to banks. So basically, the system that runs the banks.
Yep.
That's the way I see it.
And it's kind of what keeps us from going completely under if we just had purely private banks.
What was that thing called? It's kind of like it's like having monetary circulation. I don't know. I can't remember.
But essentially, it's a actually, I don't know if the Federal Reserve is independent. I don't think it. No, it isn't, because it would. Yeah, its name would be different.
Yeah. That's
All right. So privatization. What is that?
Anybody want to go?
It's a privatization.
A formerly
Go ahead.
formerly public service that is now provided by a private company but paid for by the government.
Yeah. So, I'm actually trying to think of an example of privatization.
The transfer of business industry or service from public to private.
What was that, Betty?
It's like the transfer of public to private.
Mm-hmm. Essentially being like, okay, well, we think a private business could get this done more efficiently, so we'll pay them to do it rather than having some other thing pay for it.
I feel like that's easier done on a state level for a state bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're a lot of time you're dealing with like a community-wide infrastructure, kind of like how previous example like Amtrak. Well, Amtrak separated down to like SAC-RT for us,
Mm-hmm.
regional transit. Sorry, and it's usually, like I said, it's usually done via, unless it's like a massive thing, like during like the Great Depression, where you have the workers' union and some like the workers of the world and stuff like that.
Well,
But
here, let me give you an example that is kind of on the table nowadays. There's the argument of whether we should privatize our prisons or not.
okay, Hernandez.
I don't know if that's what your criminal justice professor is talking about, but I
I was
guess.
talking about that for like 2 weeks now. It's pretty funny.
Okay, so you
Others.
can explain what that argument is then?
Yeah, it's rather topical. Well, he was saying how he was talking about how well, it's also during that little what's it called, the 11th annual thing we went to last week. I can't remember the.
It doesn't matter what's
Sorry
the
about that.
premise. What's the premise, Trainer?
But that the state governments, because of overcrowding in prisons in California, they're paying like companies to like basically build the infrastructure, and they'll pay the subsidies for the companies, and the companies are giving the felons like bare minimum that's like subhuman levels of treatment. It's inhumane, but they're reaping profits from it, and that's kind of the problem with privatization of prisons.
Mm-hmm. Because they have them participate in labor that they profit from,
Yep.
such as farming.
So they do the little as possible. They do. I guess that's kind of the separation between like privatization and like the standard general idea of bureaucracy. The general idea of bureaucracy is to use the most money possible to do the least amount, and for private, it's like use the least amount to make the most. It's kind of like the reverse of each other.
Yeah, and neither work out
Perfectly.
for people.
It never works out perfectly. No.
Need more of a balance.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the big art. That's just one example of the privatization argument. Does that make sense to everyone? I'm not hearing any objections, so I will head on to State Department. Can somebody explain what that is?
State Department.
It deals with foreign affairs.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, there's like nothing else. There's like one department in the U.S. that deals with foreign affairs.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, all the embassies belong to the State Department and everything.
Yep.
Okay. So is it just like embassies, or are they dealing with like foreign nationals as well, like people that visit, or? Okay, so it's just like
any foreign relations.
Oh, okay.
The State Department.
Okay. I was wondering if it's just like embassies or is it like people who visit other countries for goodwill or stuff like that. I was wondering. Kind of like missionaries or something. Is that involved or something like that? Not missionaries exactly, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I understand. I get what you mean, but yeah, and that they are part of it too.
Okay. Cool.
And so, for the Freedom of Information Act, I kind of wanted to just go to the Wikipedia page.
I went to the actual thing, and the question I have about that is like if it was like an act that like gave people that like to access federal information, why was everybody so mad about Snowden? Because he basically released a bunch of government documentation. So I'm kind of confused on that now.
Let's go to the Wikipedia page and maybe it'll clarify. So, if you look at the scope of the act, it says the act explicitly applies only to executive branch government agencies. These agencies are under several mandates to comply with public solicitation of information, along with making public and accessible all bureaucratic and technical procedures for applying for documents from that agency. So basically, it only applies to executive branch government agencies.
So does this act like remove executive privilege? So does it? Because we were talking about that like last week, and I was wondering.
It doesn't, because that would endanger whatchamacallit, that could endanger national security.
Okay, I was just wondering.
And that was one of the reasons why Snowden was condemned and stuff like that, because people saw it matter.
Okay. That's cold. So cold.
Okay, and then we have the National Security Agency, the NSA. That was created post 9/11 to help protect us from foreign terrorism and domestic
Homeland security and crap like that. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And then the Health and Human Services, and that is a very large bureaucracy where a bunch of little ones are underneath. Remember when we were looking at the types of bureaucracy video, they showed three different agencies that are under the Health and Human Services, such as the Center of Disease Control, the Federal Drug Administration, the Food and Drug Administration, and yeah, can't remember the other one, but you can look back. So we have about 3 minutes left. Did you guys want to talk about the stuff from and during debate, or?
I have a question. So it's like for a test tomorrow. So before one to on oh my god, break, he put up a slide of what we were gonna do basically because of the gap of the break. So can this test still be in reference to 2 weeks ago? Well, last week?
Did you write down what was on that slide? I was trying to find that slide.
Let me take a picture. I think I might have taken a picture, but I don't get it because there's no specific, that's why I want to ask you.
Yeah, and you know what? I was trying to find that slide earlier today, but I couldn't find it when I was watching the recording. So.
It says it's only going to cover the readings from November 29th, which is today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no readings.
Oh, there's
Alright, then.
there's one.
There's readings for today. There's two of the.
It says quizzes will cover only the readings of November 29th. There we go.
Yep. Okay. So just focus on bureaucracy.
Yep. Federal bureaucracy. Oh God.
The test, though, on December 1st,
Mm-hmm.
for those that are in classroom, because I know some of you guys are still in classroom.
Mm-hmm.
For classroom, it's November 2017, 22nd, and 29th. For the web, the test will cover only the class of November 22nd.
Okay.
So everybody's different.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for providing that information.
Except studio, we chill on Thursday.
Yeah.
Yep. Because you guys talk.
Well, yeah, I don't.
All right. We have 1 minute left. Any last questions? All right. Make sure you guys read those too and during debate things.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
I'm going.
See ya. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
You guys want